Today is August 9th, 2019. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University, and I'm conducting an oral history project called STEM Areas and Women. And with me today is Melissa Caldwell McGillen, who is the Vice President Supply Chain for Williams in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And she's also a graduate of Oklahoma State University, 2001,
Yes.
with a degree in chemical engineering. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
I guess I should say where we are too. We are in the Angie DeVoe room in the OSU library here in Stillwater on the campus of OSU. So let's begin with learning when and where you were born.
I was born in March of 1978 in Mason City, Iowa.
Okay.
So we lived there. I don't remember. We moved, I think, whenever I was around 2, and moved to Columbia, Missouri for a few years, and then moved to Stillwater when I was in 2nd grade.
And then that was partly because your father was in natural.
Yes, he was in the National Resource Conservation
Service. Yeah.
Yes.
And they move around. So.
They move around a little bit. Thankfully, we were able to stay there in Stillwater for.
So where did you go to elementary school?
I went to elementary school at Sanger Ridge Elementary here in Stillwater.
And then middle school.
Then went to middle school and then junior high and high school. So I spent my entire kind of elementary school career after 2nd grade here in Stillwater. And then I liked it so much that I decided to continue my college here as well.
In high school, you graduated in what year? 2000, probably would have been 2001 too. No.
Well, I graduated
96.
high school in 96.
96.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite subject?
My favorite subject, I always liked math and science. That was always one of my favorite things. I've learned I like puzzles, and I think I like math and science because there was a definite answer. And I think growing up through, like as a child, I always wanted to be like right, or I always wanted to do things the right way. And I think that's kind of what drew me to math and science, is that there was a definite solution. You just had to find your way to it.
But did you have brothers and sisters?
I have a younger sister, so she's 2 years younger.
Okay. And did she like math too?
No.
Okay,
We are complete opposites in that regard.
Well, in high school, was there a particular teacher that was a mentor or that influenced your path from there on?
I wouldn't say I had a particular teacher that influenced it. It was just something like I think, in 6th grade, you kind of have to make that decision. Are you going to go more the advanced route, or are you going to go kind of the regular route? And I'm not quite sure how that decision was made, how I got put in that class, but then you start finding all your classmates that are in the same classes over and over again. And so I just kind of found my group of people that were in the same classes and working through it. I think originally I wanted to be either a social worker or I wanted to be a surgeon. I couldn't decide which one I wanted to be. I really like helping people, and so that's kind of where I was going. And by the time I was in high school, I was leaning more towards the surgeon route. And I loved all the medical shows. That's fascinating to me, how the human body works. And so I was a TA, or like a teaching assistant, or like a student aide for our chemistry teacher in our chemistry class. And so that was really fun, getting to help all the other students kind of behind my class, some with the problems that they were having, but also looking through, the homework and different things like that. And then in our advanced placement class, we actually had 2 students from OSU come speak to our class. One was a female, and I remember she came and she started talking about all the things that she was doing as a chemical engineer. And she had so much passion and excitement in her voice. I decided that day, I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. And I remember coming home and thinking, that's it. And then I realized, if I really do want to be a surgeon, I could get my chemical engineer's degree and then eventually go into med school. That would be a really good basis for for medical school. Or I could go in and do like biomedical engineering eventually and like design all of the prosthetic arms and that type of technology.
And still help people in that
It's,
way.
it's all helping people.
Yeah.
And the more that I got into it, the more that I just really liked solving problems and figuring out ways to make things better.
Well, why between chemistry and chemical engineer? I mean, there's two different tracks. I'm assuming what's the deciding factor of which way you go?
Which way?
Yeah.
I really like the practical application of it. And so like with chemical engineering, there's lots of different things that you could do. And it's all about like finding problems in the real world and then engineering ways to solve them. So I really like knowing how things work and then putting that knowledge and applying it.
If I'm not mistaken, your dad's an engineer too.
He
isn't
is.
He? Did that influence you any?
I mean, I'm sure it did. You know, always being around and hearing the types of things that he was working on and working with him, you know, with homework and working through math problems. I loved working through math problems with him because my dad has a really great way of, he doesn't tell you the answer. He just keeps asking questions to help you think about it and then helps you kind of get to the answer yourself. So you start getting that confidence like, oh, I can do this. You know, I figured this out, when really, even though he's kind of helping you along the way.
That is neat. Well, then what's her background?
Her background is more on the liberal arts side.
Okay.
So they're a really good mixture, and it was nice growing up in that environment because you really got to see both sides. And so you got to see, like with my mom, very focused on people and helping and that compassion, which I think kind of merged into why I was really wanting to do something where you're helping people. It's just the way I ended up doing it was through engineering.
Well, in high school, did you have chemistry classes? I guess you did, since you were teaching or helping.
I did, yeah. I had a lot of chemistry classes. So I ended up taking like the regular chemistry and AP chemistry because I liked it so much.
Were there about equal numbers of girls and boys in those classes? Do you remember?
I'd say it's probably a lot more boys, but I don't feel like I really noticed it. So going through high school, I didn't have like a particular crowd that I went around with. So I was kind of like that. I was in band and I was in kind of the advanced placement courses and I was in softball and basketball. And so I was able to just kind of float around in all of the different groups.
Broad. How about FFA or 4-H?
No,
neither one of those.
No, none of those. No, my focus was really around school and then music and sports.
Okay, so it's your graduation time, and you just automatically going to go to OSU, or did you go check out other places? Or?
Well, I didn't. So I have this tendency, like once I get my mind stuck on something, it's just like, oh, there's the decision, and I may look at a few things, but I really loved Stillwater, and they had a really good engineering program.
How did you know that, though? How did you know that they had a good one?
Well, I don't really know.
You just assumed they...
I think I just assumed they did. Maybe I came up here and looked around, but I didn't really know how to judge one way or the other. It's funny looking back on it, if I really had wanted to do biomedical engineering, this wouldn't have necessarily been where to go. I didn't even know how to go about picking a place based upon what you want to do. I was just thinking more around overall majors. And it seemed like they had a good program and it was in a good environment, and I don't know.
Did you live at home?
I didn't. And actually that was one of the best gifts that my parents ever gave me. I remember whenever I was thinking that I wanted to go to Oklahoma State, I remember my parents telling me, that's wonderful, we'd love to have you go there, but as far as we're concerned, you're in a different city and state. And so they recognized the importance of kind of that independence and that freedom and developing your own self. And so they said, our doors are always welcome. You can come whenever you want, but we're not gonna barge in We're in 2 different cities as far as you're concerned.
So where did you live?
Well, I started out living in the dorms
Which one?
in Drummond.
Okay.
Yeah, Kerr Drummond. And then eventually I ended up getting a rental house with some of my friends long term. It worked out really well. So going into college, there was an application for like the SEAT Scholars Program.
Okay.
And, got the application out. I'd always done, really well in high school, but I wasn't like the top valedictorian or whatever. And so we talked and I decided not to apply for it, thinking that, well, there's a huge pool and I'm just not gonna go for it. And got into my freshman year, and it just so happened that they started the Phillips Scholars Program whenever I was a freshman. And so they were just building up the program that first year. And just coincidence, I ended up being in the Dean Reed's Introduction to Engineering class and started, I guess, getting to know him a little bit, and he got to know me. And when they were looking for kind of recommendations for this Phillips Scholars Program, they sent it out to, a small number of people, and I happened to be included in that pool. And through an interview process, I ended up getting selected into the program, which was a complete shock. I don't know if you know anything about the program.
I don't.
It's an amazing program. I think it's changed a little bit over the years, but at the time it was a full ride scholarship, all tuition, room and board, books. And then they also matched you up with a mentor from Phillips. And so we would do different events with them over the year. And then they took us on a trip to Washington, D.C., to go look at different industries and different things. And then on our last year, they took us over to Japan and Singapore. And we merged with the SEAT Scholars to do this overall scholars trip. And it was just such an impactful program where you actually, one, it was nice because you didn't have to worry about tuition. And so you could really focus in on your schoolwork and your projects and things like that. But also just getting to meet with a mentor who's actually working in industry, and as you're working through all your coursework and you're trying to figure out, is this really, can I really do this, or how do you use it? Your mentor was there to kind of help you. Don't worry about that, and what I kept hearing over and over and over again, it's not necessarily about learning all of the nuts and bolts in school. It's really about learning how to use your resources and how to think through it and how to apply it.
Was your mentor male or female?
He was male.
Male. Okay.
Yeah, and actually, I still keep in touch with him. He lives down in Texas today. He was in a unique part of Phillips where he actually worked in the mines. Phillips doesn't do that anymore, but he actually worked in the mines, coal mines, and so he was just wonderful. He was just there to really just provide that encouraging word, especially when I felt, I was struggling or not knowing necessarily what to do. And he was just always there.
How did you communicate? Was it in face?
Well, as part of the program, they would bring all of the mentors in. We'd do a program maybe a couple times a year. So we would get to talk face to face, and then other times it was through phone. We would do phone appointments and talk over the phone or email. And
so how many from OSU would be in the program?
At the time, I think there were, I'll probably get this number wrong, maybe it was between 8 to 15.
How many girls?
Female?
Ratio?
It actually was about 50-50.
Okay. So things were picking up about
Things were starting to pick up a little bit. I would say even in our classes though, like my chemical engineering class, there were 40 of us, 40 people total. And then there were about 8 women. So.
A fourth.
Yeah.
Roughly a fourth.
Yeah, 20-25%.
And did those 8 finish? Do you recall if they all
did.
All finished?
Yeah, they all did. So
Was there a society for women for chemistry majors or whatever on campus?
There
or
was
was
a
it just
society
mixed?
there was a couple. So I was involved with the American Institute for Chemical Engineers, and then I was also involved in the Society of Women Engineers.
Okay.
And then I was also involved with the Student Council. And so
You were busy.
I like being involved and helping people. And so that was a fun way to be involved.
So you had other exposure to other women.
Oh, yes.
Trying to do the same, go down the same path you were going.
Yes. Down. Yeah. No, it was good. And it's nice being in that small class size because after a while you kind of forget who's male or female. It's really just we're all in it together and how are we going to get through it?
Was it a four-year program?
It was a 4-year program. I took 5.
Oh, okay.
But
was there a class at about 8-year lunch?
Yes. It was circuits.
Circuits.
I had the hardest time with circuits. It was like I felt like it should have been It's like chemistry, but I felt like everything was switched. And I'd be struggling and struggling and struggling. And I remember like one test I had just bombed, and I was making a C in the class, which that was one of the first C's I think I've ever made in my life. And I was really, really upset. And I still remember my talk with my dad. And he said, Melissa, get your C and get out of there. You're never gonna use that again, as a chemical engineer. And then I had to laugh because on my first internship at Williams, my very first project was a controls project where I was having to basically design the circuit. So thankfully I remembered use your resources. So I went and found the subject matter expert and had him help me.
And that was acceptable?
And that was totally fine. That was acceptable. That's how all of our projects work. So
I don't know much about Williams. What's their primary?
Williams is a natural gas company, so we don't actually produce anything. So we're a gathering, processing, and transmission company. So once the producers produce the gas, then we will actually go out to their location and build pipes and infrastructure to get it to a processing plant, clean it up so that by the time it leaves our plant, you can use that gas in your homes for heating. And then we transport it across the country. So one of our largest lines, we actually transport about 30% of the nation's gas.
Okay.
And we support a large amount of the gas, like up through New York City. So.
And in Tulsa.
And it's headquartered in Tulsa. So, yeah. Yeah, they've had an interesting transformation over the years. They're over 100 years old. And
wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're chugging along, doing really well in school and doing all this work. What'd you do for fun during college?
I did a lot of intramural sports.
Okay.
So that was my fun. Intramural sports, and then just being with friends. And my boyfriend, now husband at the time, was in the band, and so go to a lot of the band events. And
well, you mentioned one professor. Were there others that played a major role or influential, or that you liked or didn't like or whatever?
I loved all the professors.
Didn't have.
Yeah,
didn't stick out. Just he was the best or she was. Well,
I
guess I should say, was there any female professors?
There was. Yeah, Dr. Karen High was one of our professors that kind of followed us through the classes. And
well, that helped.
Yeah, one of the things I really appreciated about, I think, almost all the professors that I had is that they had all been in industry at one time or another. And so whenever you were working through, it wasn't just about the academic and the theory, but they also talked about the application of the concepts and how it's actually used in real life. And so even like our homework projects that we would have would be based upon similar examples to what they had faced in industry, which gave it a nice flavor. It gave you a better idea of what you were actually going to be doing. And then I also liked that they also brought in a lot of like the economic evaluation. And so you started to get that business sense of it's not just about the engineering side and building something that works great from a science standpoint, but making sure that you're doing it in a very cost-effective way. So
Connecting the dots.
I really like that.
While you were a student, did you go back to Stillwater chemistry class and do the same talk that
I
you
can't
had heard?
remember. I know I wanted to. I can't remember if I actually did it. But since then, I have gone back to campus a number of times doing talks, helping kind of explain, like, what do you do after you're actually graduated and out in the real world?
Did you ever make contact with the girl that had come to your
I
class?
didn't, and in fact, I don't even know her name. I wish I knew her name to tell her that she really kind of changed the trajectory of where I was going just because of her enthusiasm and passion for what she was studying. I know. I know.
And that would have been what year? We'll see if we can do some.
Yeah, that would have been in 1995 in Mr. Schrader's class.
And what time of the year? Spring or fall?
It was in the spring.
Spring semester.
Yeah, spring semester, I think probably of 95.
Well, if they're still doing yearbooks at that point, but we'll.
Yeah.
We can.
Yeah, I remember she showed a picture of her internship experience where she was standing like next to a demethanizer tower. It's one of the towers that it used to separate out the gas. And I never even knew about those before, but it was really cool the way that she was explaining it. I said, yeah, I can do that.
Go to the library, check out some books on the subject.
I did not.
Any of your close friends, go into engineering too?
One of the things that's hard for me is that because I went to high school in Stillwater and then I went to college in Stillwater, even in college, it was really difficult to remember, okay, do I know you just through college or do I also know you from high school? Because a number of my friends went to OSU from high school as well. So I don't think any from high school.
Well, you remember if there were just 40 of you, if any of those were familiar faces in your class.
No, they were all new. They were all new on the engineering side, but yeah.
So were you thinking while you were in college what your next step was going to be, and what kind of job you wanted or where you wanted your job to be?
Yeah, I didn't really know. So I think one of the challenging things is like with engineering, you spend your first 2.5 years just doing kind of all of the prereqs for your courses, and so you don't really have a good idea of what chemical engineering actually is until you get into your professional level classes. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't really have a clue what that was going to be. I was involved with the student council, and so we put on the career fairs every year. And so I remember going to that early on and talking with different companies, just trying to get a sense of what was out there. But I was still kind of struggling, trying to figure out, do I still go with the medical side or do I stick with kind of the typical chemical engineering, at least around here, is oil and gas, because that's where a lot of the companies are. And then being a Phillips Scholar, it also made me feel like, well, that's kind of oil and gas is probably your path. And so that made it pretty easy. I think at the time, the program was still so new, they weren't quite prepared for what to do with all these, engineering students getting ready for internships. And when it came time to start trying to secure an internship right before we graduated, the year before we graduated, I remember really struggling with feeling this sense of loyalty, like I really needed to go work for ConocoPhillips at the time, but there weren't really any opportunities. And then there were all these other opportunities, with Williams and some others. And I remember having the conversation with my mentor, like, I'm really struggling with this. What do you think I should do? And I remember he was very clear of, if they don't have the opportunities, don't let that hold you back. You need to look out for yourself and do what's best for you long term. And I'd had a couple interviews with a few companies, including Williams, and then I ended up getting the offer from Williams to join as an intern, and then they also had a rotational development program that you could go into after that sounded really intriguing, and I was kind of leaning that way. And then my mentor told me, it's okay, they're a great company, you should really explore that. So I interned with Williams in 2000 and had a fantastic experience. I mean, it was amazing to me the amount of responsibility that they gave you just kind of day one. I thought that it would be more like copying papers or maybe participating on teams and checking things, but doing a lot more learning. And they actually gave me 2 projects to do. So I was charged with specifying or speccing out a salt bath heater, which I didn't even know what a salt bath heater was.
I don't either.
And then I had to work to reline one of our brine ponds. And at the time I didn't know what a brine pond was, but it was really interesting because all of the products that we store, like the natural gas liquids, so propane, butane, gasolines, they actually store in caverns underground, and these caverns are made out of salt, which is in Kansas. It was crazy to me. And the way that they moved product in and out was by using saturated salt water to physically displace it and push it out. And so they had these huge ponds that were lined to prevent anything from going, into the ground. And it was time where we needed to do an inspection and figure out whether or not we needed to replace those. So those were my 2 big projects for the summer, and I was completely in charge of them.
What if you did it wrong?
Well, that was my fear. Because, I went into engineering because I liked that there was one answer, and then you get out and realize that, man, there's a lot of different ways that you could do this, and I don't know which way is right or which way is wrong. And so it's just a matter of, just kind of have to jump in and start looking. And kind of what I found over time is that you jump in and you start a direction, and then you kind of take a minute to pause and say, am I still on the right track, or do I need to kind of move over this way? And then keep going, and then so your path is kind of like meandering, not a straight line, but you eventually get there.
Well, was someone overseeing what you were doing though?
They were. Yeah, I wasn't completely on my own. They were double checking my work. I did have an engineer that was assigned to look over everything, and then I had my manager who would look over, and I had a couple different people who were looking at it, but it made me feel really good because after I finished the project that summer, and the next year after I had come back to Williams, the area engineer at this location called me and he says, I'm having to do the exact same thing that you did. Can you just send me? Can you send me that, because I need to copy it?
That made you feel good.
That made me feel good. I was like, okay, well then, one, I know it worked. It got a good result, and they can replicate it. So that was a good feeling.
Well, were the 2 that were overseeing you for your internship, were they both men?
They were.
Engineers?
Yeah.
Do you remember if there are other women engineering levels?
There were actually. So, she's actually one of my mentors still today. She was one that I don't know that I necessarily interviewed with her, but she was there at all the information sessions and kind of greeters and helping make some of the selections. And so I remember going outside my comfort zone. She was a big golfer, and so after we met, she was like, "Oh, hey, we're gonna go play golf, at Karsten with some other people. Would you like to join with us?" And I was like, "Sure."
Did you play golf?
No.
You learned real quick.
I learned real quick. We still laugh about that, but it was just kind of that, yeah, let's jump in, let's do this, and I'll figure it out somehow. And we ended up getting to know each other, and it all worked out.
Well, I guess that's good advice for the next person, just if it's
It
if
is.
it's outside your comfort zone, do it anyway.
It is actually. So I have a lot of mentors, so I call them my board of directors. I don't like just having one or two. It's kind of like a company having a group of people that have all different perspectives and experiences that can really, really help you. So I call it my board. And one of the mentors on my board, they always told me whenever I was evaluating a potential opportunity, she would ask, does it make you uncomfortable? Does it make you nervous? And if I said, oh no, I've got this, then she'd be like, well, then you're not going to grow. And you don't need to do that. But if it made me nervous or it made me, kind of wonder, I don't know if I can do this, she'd be like, that's the one you need to go for.
Okay.
And so for any opportunity since then, that's always kind of been my barometer of, am I nervous about it? Am I worried whether or not I can do it? And if so, then that's what I'm going to do.
So how many people are on this board?
Well, it changes, but usually it's around 8.
Oh, okay, good size board.
It's a good size board. Yeah, I don't meet with all of them all the time, but
On every decision.
on every decision. But I believe that if opportunities come up at the last minute, and the likelihood that someone's going to be there right when you need them is usually pretty small if you only have 1 or 2 mentors. And so I think the more people that know you and know your abilities and can speak up when you're not in the room, the better off you are. And it also helps me, I think, from a job performance standpoint, because they're all in different parts, either of the industry or the company, and they can see things that I can't necessarily see from where I'm at. So they help me figure out how to make the best decision, or whenever I'm thinking through a decision, thinking through the different perspectives and what might be impacted.
How did you learn to do that sort of thing, though? I mean, to have a board, or was it just?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think I got lucky.
Or don't be afraid to ask.
I think I got really lucky. So, one, I already had it kind of given to me through Phillips here on campus. So I already had that experience, and I saw how beneficial that was. And then in college, I also started getting involved with SWE, and then we would be mentoring the younger engineers. Whenever we were juniors and seniors, we'd be matched up with younger, freshmen and sophomores. And so you started to really get the benefit of mentoring and helping one another. And I think that's one of my passions. And so I think I've always just kind of continued that. And I was really lucky whenever I started with Williams, I started out in their rotational development program. And so the idea behind it is you would have 3 one-year rotations in different parts of the company, so that by the time you got out after your 3 years, you essentially could have almost 5 years of experience, because you'd seen so many different things. And it was a fairly small group, and we had what we called action learning sessions. So there were 4 or 5 of us in a group, and you were matched up. I was the first year, and then you had 2 second years and a third year. So you had all this experience along the way, and you just get together once a month and you bring up, hey, I'm really struggling with this issue. I don't know where to go. And it could be either a technical engineering issue, or it could be, usually it was more of the kind of the soft skills. I don't know how to get through this group, or I don't know how to influence. And that ended up kind of being a peer mentoring group. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I think it's over there. I meant to turn that off. Can we press pause? So sorry.
It's okay. That happens.
Yeah, so I think I already had kind of that natural peer mentoring group.
Mm-hmm.
And so I used that, and then that one woman or female engineer that I interviewed with initially. Kind of used her for support. And then over the years, I somehow got invited to attend Catalyst. It's a national convention for women. And Williams had a table. I think we brought like 10 people from the company, and I got to go. And so it was a day in New York City. I remember we got to stay at the Waldorf. I was like, ah. And you just got to listen to all these companies and what they had done as far as helping build up the women in their organization and really foster that sense of giving back and developing and supporting. And so I remember coming back from that session feeling so energized. And I met Allison Anthony, where I really got to know her there. And if you don't know her, she's currently the CEO of Tulsa United Way, but she used to be the director of the foundation at Williams and community relations. And so I really got to know her, and I actually asked her to be one of my mentors. And she and I started working together because I was really passionate about that mentoring culture. And we ended up, I ended up presenting to our CEO an idea of what we should do to help kind of build that mentoring culture within the organization. And one of my ideas was that all of the senior leaders needed to have a goal to mentor like 1 or 2 females or minority people in the organization. And I had a small group of people where we kind of all banded together and developed kind of like our own peer mentoring group called Career Action Teams. And one of the things we challenged each other with was to go out, and we had to identify some leaders in the organization that we respected and admired and ask them to be our mentor. And so that was one way that I think I kind of built that network or that group, is that just through a couple of those events.
What was We Women of Electric? We's.
Oh, SWE, Society of Women Engineers. SWE, yeah.
Transcribers will ask. So
yes,
SWE.
Society of Women Engineers.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we had a mentoring thing there, and then mentoring really speaks to me. So kind of continued. That's, I think, has helped me throughout my career.
So you went directly from OSU to Williams, and 18 years later.
And 18 years later, I'm still here. Yeah.
Did you? I mean, that probably didn't cross your mind at that point either. That hey, this is where I'm going to spend my entire career.
Yeah, it didn't.
And it's not been in the same position though. You've been.
I've moved around a lot. I have a really interesting career path. So I think about careers not as a ladder, but more as a lattice. And so to me, a career lattice is really, it's a lot more exciting because I think you can go up, you can go down, you can go over. And for me, I really enjoy breadth. Like I like knowing a lot about a lot of different things and really seeing how they all connect. And for some people, they like depth, and we definitely, we need both. But for me, the reason I really enjoyed math and science and engineering is because I liked understanding how things work and understanding what problems are in place and how we can kind of solve those. And I was always drawn more to the business side, but I like the technical understanding of how it works. So through kind of my rotations that I did in that first rotational program, I started to learn what I liked and what I didn't like. Probably it was difficult at the time. I learned that I do not like being a project manager. I thought I would, but I didn't. And so I tried it again later on in my career, and I discovered, no, I really do dislike it. So over my career, I've been I was a plant engineer, operations engineer, actually working out in Wyoming And then I was a project manager 2 different times. I was an asset integrity engineer, so I got to learn about the caverns that we were talking about earlier. I was in charge of all of the integrity inspections for those caverns. And then I also got to do a lot of work offshore, working with our pipelines and understanding the asset integrity challenges, working offshore and learning a little bit about crude oil. And it's just fascinating, all the different things that I've been able to do. And then I decided I really wanted to learn why we make the decisions we make from a commercial perspective. And so I ended up switching over from engineering into the business side in our commodity optimization group, where you got to work directly with operations on a day-to-day basis, and our volume management teams where they're actually scheduling the gas on the pipelines, making sure that we're meeting the market needs, and then looking at the commodity markets and all of our commercial terms to make sure that we were, one, meeting our commercial obligations, and then also optimizing how we run our business. And so that was fascinating, because you're working with operations and you're hearing, about what equipment is going down. And it was like one of the very first times that I realized, wow, I did learn a lot, in college and through the first couple of rotations, because I could start to really see, whenever they say this piece of equipment goes down, here's what's really happening to the pipes, or here's, what's happening from a thermodynamic perspective, and can anticipate what the needs are going to be, and have the data and the kind of recommendations lined up. So that was a really good role to merge kind of the engineering and the business sides together. And then I had the opportunity to be a formal leader in our environmental health and safety teams. And so I got to lead our safety reps and our trainers, and then we had kind of an assurance group, like an audit group, where you'd go out and make sure that we were performing against our management framework. So that was a really cool way of getting to understand kind of how you build culture through a company, and how you influence and how you make change. So really learning about, on the engineering side, you're so focused around what's the answer or the technical specification. And then in this role, I really learned about, well, how do you measure that? And how do you make sure that we're doing what our assumptions were at the very beginning? And how do you make sure that you're doing it where you're focusing on leading measures and not just kind of looking in the rearview mirror around lagging metrics? And
a lot of territory.
It's a lot of territory. And then you got to, I also liked it because you got to bring in training. And so that was kind of where you got to bring in your creative side, which I also loved about engineering. So we got to develop training for life critical procedures, but doing it in a way and trying to understand how do people learn best, and coming up with activities on how do you practice it and apply it.
A step or two away from the chemical engineering.
It's a step or two away, but it was all around,
you
have to have that knowledge and understanding. And a lot of our work that we do, it's all focused on supporting our pipelines and our gas processing plants and our compressor stations. So having that understanding from an engineering perspective of how it actually works is, I think, kind of foundational to being able to talk about, if we make this change, what's going to happen.
Well, and having all those opportunities within one company, the company large enough that you can have all those.
I know. And the fact that I think one of the things that surprised me is I thought early on it was probably discouraged to move around so much. And so I remember the first time I had kind of graduated from this rotational program, and it was the first time that I was going to switch roles. And I was so nervous. I worried all weekend long how I was going to tell my manager that I was leaving to go to another group within Williams. And his response to that was like, Melissa, I already know. Do you not think that we talk? I already know. I think it's great, and let me know how I can support you. And
Well, was it a mentor, even though he wasn't a direct mentor?
yes, yes,
Wow.
and it just kind of opened my eyes, like, oh, this is okay. And so from that point on, career development really had a new meaning, and it was more of a partnership between, what my leader needed and where my interests and passions lie, and how do we connect those two. And
Were most of the moves by choice, or they come and tap you and say, are you interested in this? Or did you say, I would like to do this?
it was a combination of both. So early on in my career, it was, the rotational program, they kind of did that for you.
Right.
And then, and the first couple, it was just through relationships of, hey, I've got this position open. Are you interested? And my first thought is always, yes, that sounds great. Something new. That sounds like fun. And there were only a couple jobs where I specifically pursued them. And one was the commodity optimization job, because I really wanted to understand the business and why and how we make the decisions that we do. The other one was a commercial. I was a commercial rep. And so after I had done the environmental health and safety job, I decided I really wanted to better understand how those customer-facing roles worked. I wanted to get better experience negotiating, and I was very much an introvert, and kind of thinking about my mentors, and you're not growing if you're comfortable. I knew that I needed to get more comfortable with interacting with people that I don't necessarily work with on a daily basis or have a completely different background. And so I really started telling people that I wanted to learn the commercial side. And it took a little while. In each of those instances, that took about 6 to 9 months in order for the right position to open up where it was an opportunity.
You were proactive.
I was very proactive in it. In fact, in the commodity optimization role, I had a friend who was in the group, and so she was telling me a little bit about what they did. And so then I started reaching out to the manager of that group saying, hey, I think your group sounds really interesting. I want to learn more. And he was a great storyteller. And so we would go to lunch, and I remember he would bring stacks of paper. And, we'd have, through lunch, he'd just sit there and be writing things down and explaining everything. And we would do that, every couple of weeks just to learn the business. And so then whenever an opening happened in his group, as soon as I heard that it was opened, I called him up and I said, I just want you to know I'm interested. And he said, great, well, let's come, why don't you come meet me and we'll talk about it. And I come to this meeting thinking it's just going to be he and I talking like we had been before, and it turns out it's like a mini interview. And I started answering all of the questions because he was asking me, why are you interested in this position? And so I tell him, here's why I'm interested in this position. And then he quickly stopped me and he was like, no. Think about it from a business standpoint. Why are you interested in helping the organization? How is that going to help? And it was a painful meeting, but he really helped me see approaching, all the questions, whether it's an interview or whether it's a project. It's not necessarily inward focused. It's really that outward, how can I better help the organization or the situation through my gifts and through my talents.
So your formal interview, you were more prepared.
I was more prepared, yeah.
Well,
that was very helpful. Very helpful.
Were there any of those that you applied for and didn't get?
Yeah, it's happened a couple different times, but I'm a firm believer that whatever is meant to happen is going to happen. And if I didn't get that role, then there was something bigger and better for me. So recently I had an opportunity as a potential general manager for an operating area. And it was outside my comfort zone because other than the time I spent in Wyoming, I hadn't spent a whole lot of time directly in operations. But I'd had a lot of exposure in supporting it in a variety of roles. And the feedback that I got after the interview is that they were looking for someone who had more operations experience. I was disappointed because I was really looking forward to it.
And was it because you were female
Mm-mm.
that they said no?
No, that wasn't. I don't think. It could have been. So I mean, it could have been, but then it turned out just a couple, probably maybe 6 to 9 months later, a position opened up, and I ended up getting, my current VP role. So, and this one is much better suited for my passion and my talent. So, and that's happened a couple different times. So I always know that if this doesn't work out, then there's something else that I'm meant to do instead. But kind of going back to what you talked about, I actually think early on in my career, being a female engineer actually helped me.
How so?
I think there's sometimes a negative stereotype of what engineers are, especially if they're coming from a corporate office out into the field. And so the fact that whenever I went out there, even though I was an engineer from the corporate office, I didn't look like the stereotype. And so that, I think, initially, immediately just kind of took down that wall. And then my focus was on really trying to understand how they did their work. So whenever I went out there for an operations engineer, my first 2 weeks, I went on shift just to follow the operations technicians, and including night shift, to really understand what they do and what they struggle with and what they need. And also to learn from them, because they're the ones working with it day in and day out. I'm an engineer who just graduated from college. I may know a lot of theory, but that's not necessarily how it works. And so that's probably one of the best things I ever did, was going on the night shift and being able to just sit down and observe the optics. And they were, once they found someone who was really willing to sit and listen and were really interested in the knowledge that they had, they kind of just took me under their wing, and they would start pointing out all of these issues, and I knew that I had someone, whenever I was trying to figure out, okay, what do you think? They would always tell me that kind of unbiased view.
Well, so your attitude with them probably helped too.
It probably helped too.
Yeah.
But I do think that one of the reasons why they were more open to me and being receptive was because I didn't necessarily look like the stereotype.
Well,
And yeah, and over time, one of the things that my dad always told me is, work really hard, especially at the beginning, to get a really good reputation. And once you have that, you have some credibility that you can build on. And after those first couple roles where I was able to kind of get in and really develop that relationship, and then I was able to perform because of that, then, ever since then it hasn't ever
proved you could do it.
been in it. Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that I worried about is, as I was going through some of my different roles and starting to go up the ladder, I was concerned that people were thinking that I was getting these positions because I was female. And fortunately, because I had performed so well before and I had enough supporters, if that ever came up, others quickly, squashed it. So, yeah.
So how many times did you have to move out of state? Just the once?
Just the once.
Just the once?
Yeah, that's probably an anomaly for most people.
Well, each one of these let's go back. You're married.
Mm-hmm.
And you have children.
Yes.
How did that work that into all this other stuff you were doing?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story. So whenever I was an intern at Williams, I got engaged that summer. And shortly after I got engaged, I got the offer for the full-time offer at Williams, but the offer was for the rotational development program, and we knew that I would spend 1 year in Tulsa, and then the next year I knew it would be somewhere outside of Tulsa, but we didn't know where. We probably wouldn't know where until right before it came time to move. I was just so excited to get the offer, and I knew that it was a great company and it was what I wanted to do, that I accepted before realizing, oh no, I need to think about someone else. It's not just my life I need to be worrying about. And so I went home and I talked to my husband, and fortunately he was like, yeah, that's a great opportunity. We'll figure it out. And our plans at the time is, well, we'll just live apart for a year. You know, and there were going to be enough meetings that I could fly back and forth. And then by this time we were now married, and it was time to move, and I found out that I was going to be moving to Wyoming, and we started looking at each other like, why would we do that? And so to his credit, he's a percussion instructor, or he was at the time, and he was working for a great program in Tulsa with Broken Arrow, and he actually resigned from his position and moved up to Wyoming with me, where up in Wyoming there's not a huge demand for marching band and percussion instructors. And so he actually ended up driving like 4 hours to Ogden, Utah, like once a week to teach over with a friend at a college there, and or I guess it was in Pocatello, Idaho. But yeah, he really sacrificed in order for us to make that move up there. But it actually turned out, I mean, we look back on it, and that time we spent up there was one of the best things that we could have done. As a new couple. It was one of our first times that we each had lived out of state, and it was a time for us to really just explore and build a life together. And so what we thought was going to be something completely different, it turned out to be really, really good. And then when I had the opportunity to move back to Tulsa, then that worked out really well for him, and he was able to get back in with Broken Arrow, and he really built up his career there and ended up going out on his own, building a niche for himself, and it all worked out. We waited to have kids for quite a while, so we were married for about 5 years before we had our first, and that was whenever I was in the commodity optimization role. And the manager that I had talked about, who was such a good storyteller, he was so good caring for people. And I remember I had just had my youngest, he was probably maybe 8 months old or so, and it was my birthday. And he asked me, so Melissa, what are you doing tonight to celebrate? And I said something like, oh, I don't know, we'll just probably pick up dinner and have a quiet night in. And he said, Melissa, that's ridiculous. You need to go out and celebrate. He said, I want you to bring your son over, and me and my wife will babysit, and we want you to go out and have dinner, maybe go see a movie, do something fun. And
that was sweet.
It was really, I still remember that. Every single time I think of him, I think of what he did there. And I remember we went out to dinner, and I still felt so guilty that he was babysitting, that we went back shortly after dinner, and he got mad at me because we came back so early. So I think our company culture was such that it was very welcoming. I mean, there really was a focus on that work-life balance, and I never felt like I had to choose one way or the other. Whenever I had my second, so I was in the commercial role when I became pregnant with my second, and I I was in the commercial rep role, and I had just been promoted to commercial manager. And so I was working for a new manager, and like the week before I was supposed to start, I got put on bed rest. And so I ended up being delayed in being able to start that role for about 3 months. And I always felt like I'm having to catch up, like I missed out, or he had to cover for me for that entire time. So I always felt a little guilty, and I think I put too much pressure on myself, especially after just, having your second child. And the role, I thought, as a commercial manager, you needed to be out meeting with all the different customers that we had, and that required a lot of travel. And that was really difficult.
It would be hard, yes.
With a newborn. And I finally went to him and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I was really second guessing myself as a formal leader. Like, I'm not this charismatic leader. I'm still very much introverted, even though I can be extroverted. I like being with a small group of people, and I don't think that's what a leader is, And so I told him I needed to step down. And this manager, he's actually one of my best mentors that I have on my board. He listened to me, and he could tell how difficult of a time I was having with it. And he found a way. He kind of recognized, I could still provide value. I just needed to be in a different role for my own personal sake. And he found a way for me to find another role in the organization. He helped message it in a way that it wasn't seen as a demotion, but it was just another way to support the organization. And he made that transition so much easier. And it was amazing. And the role that he kind of created this like utility player role. And so I still could report in through him, which was fantastic. But I got to work on like potential mergers and acquisitions. So I got to do a lot of the due diligence, which all of my past engineering experience that I had done before that really helped, because I was charged with looking at things from a commercial view. But I had enough technical knowledge to know whether the claims that they were making from a commercial perspective really would work, or other risks that we needed to take into account that you wouldn't necessarily have known if you didn't have that technical engineering background. And so I got exposure to that, and then I got to work on a special project with supply chain, where I got to negotiate some different agreements, and then I got to do some other bankruptcy issues with some of our producers. So I got to do work in this one role, working for this, this great person for over a year, getting so much exposure to different parts of the business. And he was an angel. It was just what I needed.
Well, I mean, you have met edge standards too, though. I'm guessing.
Oh yes.
You kept up your end of the deal.
I did. And he knew that I would. He knew that I would.
So during this time, is it a 40-hour a week? I mean, when at that particular job position, were you 8 to 5 or what?
It's 8 to 5.
8 to 5.
Yeah. I mean, most of the roles that I've been in are typically 8 to 5. But I think, being a professional in the work, especially in this day and age,
Yeah, that's just par for the course.
It's just par for the course. But I've been really fortunate to work for some really great people, where, like this one particular manager I was talking about, he couldn't sleep at night. And so he would send out emails at 2:00 in the morning. But he was also really good at saying, just because I sent it out this time doesn't mean that I expect you to reply. It's just I need to get it off, out of my head. Yeah. So I think I really appreciated being in an environment where it's okay for you to leave work early and go to a kid's function, whether it be, breakfast, or whether it be an assembly, or whatever it is that that you need to do. I've never felt like there was this pull.
Well, and same within the same company with different positions. You didn't have to go home and discuss, oh, well, I'd like to do this and it's in another
Right.
country or state or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they need to switch their jobs.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there was only one that I was looking at that was in a different state. And you know, I have such a supportive husband, and he was like, "Hey, if this is something you want to do, let's do it." And he was prepared. I mean, he was actually so ready. He was researching different things that he could do in the area, and he'd already researched the schools, and he figured out, okay, if we do this, here's where we're going to live, and
well, that does help. Yes.
yeah, so that made it a lot easier.
It sounds like with all these different positions, you've had an opportunity to work with different leadership styles and be able to piece together the best of that for yourself.
For me, yeah. I've done a lot of reflection over the years. And in fact, whenever I stepped down as that commercial manager, I remember thinking at the time, I don't have what it takes to be a formal leader. Like, I just didn't think that I didn't fit that stereotype of what a leader would be. And then I was fortunate enough to be included in, we had a pilot program with the Harvard Business School. And they brought in a small group of people, kind of emerging leaders or up-and-coming leaders. And we went through this very intense course, like over about 2 or 3 months. And it was so interesting because every single case study we did, they were all talking, it was all about different leadership styles. And I started to see myself in a lot of the case studies that they were doing, because it was all about quiet individuals, unassuming. It wasn't necessarily all these, charismatic, like life of the party people that could command a room. It was people that I really related to that were, more introspective and thoughtful, and sometimes preferred those one-on-one interactions. And that was the first time that I started to think, maybe there is a place for me. And so over those 3 months, I really did learn that really it's just about being authentic and being who you are, and figuring out what are the talents and gifts that you bring to the organization, and really focus on your strengths and don't worry so much about your weaknesses. And that really helped me solidify where I wanted to go with my career. And at the end of this course, we had to make this declaration of impact of what we were going to do after this course. And, in my declaration, I talked about, I finally figured out what I want to be. And I want to be a leader focused on process improvement and change, merging the technical side with the business side, and creating that psychologically safe environment for my teams where they can bring up issues and problems, and we'll proactively work through those. And I think because of that, I was finally able to describe where I wanted to lead. And then we had a reorganization shortly after that, and I had enough people on my board who knew that I was interested, and I got tapped to be the director of measurement, which was a perfect position. It was a perfect combination of the technical and the business side, and it was at a space where we really needed to improve all the processes. And I had a great team of people, and so we were able to make a lot of change in a really short amount of time.
Once you land on that, then why do you switch? Why do you switch? Because you've done all you can do?
Well, it's funny. I wasn't going to, because we weren't quite done. We had all of these plans, and we were probably maybe 60 or 70% of the way. We had come a long way, but we weren't even close to being finished. And so when the position I'm currently in, when that opened up, I initially didn't put my name in the hat for it, because I thought, well, I still have so much left to do over here. Now is not a good time to be changing. The team's still, pretty new and it's still unstable, and I need to be here for my team and for the company. And thankfully I had, mentors on my board who told me, Melissa, there is always going to be something going on. That's just the type of person you are never going to be finished. And so you have to decide, have you gotten at least 60 to 70% out of that position? Have you made kind of that exponential, learning and change that you want to be ready for the next role? Because these opportunities don't come up that often. And so my boss at the time, I was actually going on vacation, and he texted me and said, I just need to know, are you interested or are you not? And I told him that I was just concerned about the stability of the team and what we had going on. And he said, I understand. I appreciate the concern. I think we can work through that, but I just want to know if you want to be included on the list. So I said, absolutely. And we had a conversation, and
You've developed a reputation.
went through the informal interview, and I know it was a great list of candidates, so he couldn't have gone wrong. I'm thankful he chose me. It's been fun.
Each one of these been a pay raise?
No.
No. Well, with the Lattice concept, I'm thinking probably not.
Yeah, no. I've actually kind of demoted myself twice, and I've taken several lateral positions.
But to learn more.
Yeah. So I always tell people that I'm, coaching or mentoring, you have a really long career, and don't compare yourself to what someone else is doing because they're on a different path, Do what's authentic for you, and your strengths are different from theirs. So how can you, get the most out of where you're at? I think the nice thing about in my positions, I've never been worried about where I'm going to end up or like driving towards a particular title. I would be just as happy to retire at the level I am now as I would have been when I was an individual contributor. It's really, to me, it's more around what's your legacy and what's your contributions that you're providing. And you can be a thought leader or an influencer regardless of what your title is. Frankly, sometimes it's harder to influence and get things across when you do have a title because you don't actually get that unfiltered information.
That.
So, title doesn't really do a whole lot. In fact, whenever I talk with people, I very rarely include my title because I find if you do, people become very formal. Yeah. So
I'm assuming you've supervised males and females then, part of your team members. And notice any difference or?
No. I really don't.
I'm thinking by this time you're in the 2005, 2010, somewhere there. Things have changed. So.
They have changed. Yeah, they're. I have had instances where, like, I'm used to just going to lunch with someone to talk through, brainstorm or just get to know them better. And I have had a couple instances where they didn't feel comfortable, doing that one-on-one or having to either get a large group or we'd meet in a separate environment. But
I guess you have to think about that too, don't you? Perceptions.
Yeah, I've never worried about it because I know I'm going to be, true and maintain high integrity, and I just automatically assume that of everyone else. So, I've never worried about that.
18 years in, how many do you have to do to retire from Williams? Do you have to have 25 or 30?
Oh, no, there's no set time. It's just more age.
Okay, so
you've
got a lot more.
I've got a lot longer to go.
So what do you think's next?
I don't know. People ask me that all the time. I don't know. I love going into new groups and learning new things and figuring out how we can make things better. And
Well, have you been in all the departments yet?
almost,
Almost.
yeah. I haven't spent a lot of time in operations, but I don't necessarily think that's where my skill set is. I haven't spent a whole lot of time in corporate, and so there's a couple things that interest me there, and I haven't spent a whole lot of time in accounting, but
Well, I mean, that would get some math in there, I guess,
Yeah.
if you did the accounting.
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, I always tell people, like, whenever career planning or career development, I always caution them against picking a particular role, because usually when they're thinking about it, it's a particular role at a particular level. And the likelihood that that particular role at that level is going to be open at the exact time you need it to be open is probably pretty slim. And so the way I've approached my career and the way I encourage others to look at theirs is focus more on competencies and experiences. Like, what do you want to learn, or what do you want to be a part of? And you can get that experience a lot of different ways. So, for example, I wanted to get more experience negotiating. Well, I ended up getting it, on the supply chain project. I ended up going on the commercial side. But I also, as I started thinking about it, you're doing a lot of negotiating whenever you're trying to do a brand new initiative and getting buy-in for that initiative. And so there's so many different ways of how you can get that experience. Same way with, like, being a formal leader. The way I was able to show that I had that experience was through mentoring and through helping lead projects and leading programs like the mentoring program and some of the, we had a women's business resource group that I was taking a role in. So there's lots of, and then I also helped with our intern program. So there's lots of ways to get that experience. You don't have to have a formal title in order to do that.
Lead by example.
Lead by example. Just jump in and do it.
Is it hard, or have you noticed if it's hard for Williams to retain women? Engineers in particular?
Sometimes. I think it's actually grown a lot. Actually, if I'm thinking about our recent statistics, we actually have more female engineers than we do male engineers coming in.
More to pick from, maybe, too.
More to pick from, and and that's happened over time. So I think we actually have, especially if you look at the under 30 group, we have, it's pretty close to.
Are there things in place to help keep them, to help encourage them to stay? Like you mentioned, groups.
Yeah, I mean, we have a women's business resource group, and then
early career.
We have an early career program to help support them. And I mean, we really do try to reach out and have those it's more employee engagement and making sure that people feel that they're heard and that they can talk if there are issues coming up. And then we've done things like, sometimes we've done job sharing. We've had a couple instances of that, and working part-time or
work around having children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like it's been that
How
big
large
of
of
an
a
issue.
company is it in Tulsa? Just in in the building you work in, how many employees roughly?
Overall for Williams, we have just over 5,000.
What? Yeah, that's good.
So that's pretty large. Within Tulsa, I don't know how many. I should know how many we have, but I don't. I'd say maybe 1,000.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you go out into to the high schools now and talk on a regular basis or anything?
I don't. I wish I would love to. I just don't know how to get involved.
Williams doesn't have that finger out into that type of figure.
Not that type of finger. I am involved in the Women in Energy Network. It's called WIN, and there's a chapter in Tulsa and there's a chapter in Oklahoma City. And we have mentoring circles where we get together once a month, reading different articles and then talking about it. So you have, women from all different companies coming together. And so I'm a leader of one of those circles.
You're always busy.
Yeah.
Always learning.
Always learning.
Always
I mean,
learning.
that's what's fun.
Yeah.
I think.
So if you were to give like a 16-year-old girl advice, what are a
Mhm.
few things you would tell her?
Focus on your strengths and be authentic. Don't waste your time trying to be like the person next to you, because they're going to be who they are and they're going to have more time to devote to whatever it is they're trying to do. And people can see authenticity. So just lean into your own personal strengths and be comfortable with who you are, and don't try to be like anybody else. And then the second one is be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that really is where you grow. And find that environment where people are really there rooting for you and helping you succeed. So you need to make mistakes, and that's how you learn and that's how you grow. People on my teams always laugh, because usually whenever I'm talking with them, I'll tell them, hey, here's how I messed up. So don't do that. Here's what I learned from it. I think it's really important to be vulnerable and share not only our successes, but where we may have stumbled, and then got back up. So, yeah, those are my two things. Be authentic and just jump in. You can get out. There's nothing, if you find something you don't like, you can change. Nothing's forever. And then be comfortable being uncomfortable.
And then what about encouraging them to go into one of the STEM, like math, science, technology, one of those areas? How would you advise them in that?
I encourage almost everyone to do it, because there are so many different options. That doesn't mean that just because you study STEM that you have to be sitting in front of a computer doing calculations day in and day out. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you look at my career, I think I've been in 11 different positions in a variety of different roles, and having that STEM background really just opens up the opportunities, because it's really about understanding how things work and why they work, so that you can apply it to the business. So it will never hurt you. It just opens up more and more opportunities.
Yeah. Don't let anyone tell you no.
Yeah, just keep pushing through. Find someone else who will say, yeah, maybe we can. Or do it on the side. I had a couple of those where the company wasn't necessarily going to commit to it, and so then we decided, well, we'll just do a pilot project, and we'll just kind of work on it on our free time.
So you have a little flexibility to do that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and have fun, be creative.
So what next? You don't know.
I don't know. I don't know.
So do you have boys or girls?
I have 2 boys.
Okay, so in math and science, you won't have to talk a girl into a daughter into a STEM field.
Yeah, and I really hope that things really have changed over the last 20 years.
Right.
And I really do think that more and more young girls are starting to see you really can be anything that you want to be. And really, science and math, they're cool.
And it takes like what your experience was, so someone telling you this degree in chemical engineer, and a person standing in front of you,
Yes.
Being a cheerleader for it.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to have more of those experiences.
We do. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. If you know of any programs, I would be happy to to participate in those. So.
Thinking, does Williams do a program similar to what Phillips did that you went through?
Mm-mm.
Does Phillips still do that? Do you know?
I think they do, but on a much smaller
Small.
scale. Yeah, I think they've reined it in a little.
Well, with the numbers increasing, and more, maybe they don't have to offer it as
Yeah.
much. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It was astounding to me the investment that they made in so many young engineers.
I was looking at your, I don't know where I found it, but when you're switching positions, they almost always seem to be at the end of the year, like in December. And
I don't know
January.
why they do that. I don't know why that happens.
That's a stressful time for a lot of people in there with the holidays and stuff.
Yeah,
But then it might not be. It might be, okay, it's transitioning into a new year, so now's a good time as any.
yeah. I don't know. I don't think there was ever any purpose. I think usually it was we start thinking about it in the summer, and then it takes a while for it to actually get through. There have been a couple of times where, maybe in the summer I was thinking, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to have all these projects almost finished, and then it'll be some nice downtime, being able to go through the holidays. And then it never fails that every single time I'm thinking that, then usually something changes. And you're quickly trying to wrap up the last role and start gearing up and learning the new role so you can hit the ground running at the beginning of the year.
Well, do you have a strategy for how you end your day? Like, do you sit before you leave to say, okay, tomorrow I've got to do X, Y, and Z, or do you have some kind of routine like that?
I try. Yeah, I block out the last 30 minutes. Actually, I block out the last hour of my day knowing that maybe I'll get 30 minutes. And I do try to straighten things up and make my list for the next day.
And that's always helpful. What other tidbits of practical tidbits do you have to offer?
Yeah, one of the best things that I use OneNote a lot. And so I use OneNote to keep track of all the different initiatives that we have going on and kind of keeping my to-do list on there. And then whenever I'm thinking through my to-do list, I actually break it up into 3 different sections. So I look at it as like the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand. And so I really try to prioritize, if I don't do anything else, what is most important that I need to continue moving forward.
Is that the rocks?
That's the rocks. And then the second level is kind of those pebbles and trying to get 1 or 2 of those. And then the sand is whatever's left.
Yeah, see that filling in.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Visual.
Yeah. Usually a lot of the things that I really like to do end up being the pebbles or the sand. And so I try to sprinkle those in just to change things up during the day. But
Well, then it sounds like you have inspirational things. What do you use for that? Do you have I don't know, do you read a poem or how do you get your inspiration?
Oh, so I follow some people on LinkedIn, and they'll just kind of pop up. And so one of the ones that I'm really liking right now is around intent-based leadership. And it's really about building your team to start thinking as a leader and being able to anticipate and kind of do more of that planning. And then it's more just through my mentors and talking in groups and what books have you seen or.
Yeah, that's good. What book are you reading now, I guess?
Well, I have a couple.
Are they work related?
They're all for work.
And what are they? Do you know? Remember the titles?
I do. Well, the one I'm reading right now is about intent-based leadership, and I love the title. It's called "Get Your Ship Together." The person who wrote it, he was an officer and then on a submarine, and so it was all about how he was able to bring all the people on his ship together to kind of turn it around. And
Confined quarters is what I'm.
Yes,
Get
yeah.
along.
So that's the one I'm reading I'm reading now. One of my favorite authors that I use all the time is, and I can't pronounce his name, but Patrick Lencioni. And it's one of my favorites is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And so I use that every single time I go into a new team. My first 6 months are always just spent building that psychologically safe environment and building trust and creating that environment where they know it's expected and encouraged to kind of debate and really raise issues and work through things together as a team. So
that book would be one of your tools of the trade.
that's one of my tools. Like I tell everyone about that book. And then I'm also, I think what you measure is what gets done. And so I also like Patrick Lencioni, he also writes a book. They changed the title of it to be more politically correct, I think. But the title I like is The 3 Signs of a Miserable Job. And so it's all about understanding how what you do, how it ultimately supports the company's bottom line and the company's mission. So you have that direct tie to what you do and how it's helping the overall company. And figuring out what do you measure in order to make sure that you're on the right path.
So do you read those sort of things on the job or at home, on downtime?
Both. I read a lot, like whenever I'm traveling for work, so I'll read a lot, like on the planes.
So you have to do that much now in your current positions? Have to travel much?
I should probably be doing more than I'm doing.
But just meeting with people on the other end to discuss what? I mean.
Well, it's more, sometimes it's around meeting with different suppliers.
Okay.
But then our teams are located all across the country. So.
How many are in your team, your current?
Today it's around 90.
Wow. That's a pretty large team.
It is. So yeah, it's more kind of going out with them and trying to.
Are they all in Tulsa? All those?
Oh no.
No,
no, they're scattered all across. So we have some in, Pittsburgh and Houston and Salt Lake. And
do you have Skype time or something? Skype or how do you?
Yeah, we do.
FaceTime
We do calls. My leadership team is really split between Tulsa and Houston,
Okay.
and we've kind of all come together and agreed that we're going to get together once a month, face to face, where we can really talk through things as a team and figure out how to remove those silos and those walls. Because we all depend on one another to be successful.
Well, your business aspect, when you were here at OSU, did you have a business class?
I took several business classes actually because that always intrigued me.
As electives? Wasn't part of the engineering?
No, it wasn't part of the curriculum, but I took a couple accounting classes. I remember taking a macroeconomics class, and that one actually ruined everything else for me because I learned that concept of opportunity cost. And I realized I think really highly of myself and my time. So. Yeah, so I did, and I took a few accounting classes, and
it seems like the HR aspect of things, the human relations part of things. I'm not sure what college that would be under. Business you would think would have a class.
Yeah, I took sociology actually whenever I was in high school as a concurrent enrollment class, which was really interesting. And so I used some of that. But it's really just trying to understand people's perspectives and where they're coming from. And usually if you can understand their assumptions coming in based upon their experiences, you can usually get to a collaborative solution.
Yes, you think I think of the visual peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yes. Yeah.
You've added your layers.
I know.
And then you peel them off when you need them. So.
That's right. Yeah, I know it all works.
Yeah.
Some of my favorite classes that I took here, I took art history classes.
Oh.
I love art, and so that's one of the things that I do in my free time is I paint. So I like
abstracts or landscapes.
I like impressionists because my view of art is if you have to kind of look at it cross-eyed and then it really comes into focus, then that's my kind of art. So you can make mistakes and it just adds to the uniqueness and the beauty of the painting.
Kind of like your leadership style.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we've covered a lot. Is there anything you think we need to cover that I haven't? We've talked about managing balance at work and family. Anything you've already said, what a couple of things that, women, your gender has helped more than it has hurt along the way. How to get people and kids interested in STEM.
Yeah.
Biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is just, for me personally, overcoming my own self-confidence. And it's like not listening to that voice in your head. My voice can sometimes be really mean. And
Mean to yourself.
Mean to myself. Like, there's always just doubts. I don't know if I can do this, or what am I doing? And I wish people knew that I have no clue what I'm doing, and I'm just totally, just going. I'm faking it, but
Fake it till you make it.
fake it till you make it. But what I'm learning is that everyone feels that way, and so that's been kind of freeing. That okay, well, I'm doing the best I can,
Well, obviously you're doing something right, or
Yeah.
they wouldn't have kept you 18 years.
That's right.
I wouldn't think.
Yeah, that's right. So
Is that for Williams, is that a pretty long career? Do most people stay?
most people stay. Usually, people stay quite a long time. We had someone who just celebrated their 50th
Wow.
anniversary.
How old? Probably started when they were.
Yeah, I don't know. He's still working on the pipeline in one of our compressor stations. So
does that require college education?
mm-mm.
So if you could have started at 18.
He could have started
at
at
18.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Still,
what
that's-
age.
Still be pushing 70.
Yeah,
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
that just tells you something for the company. That it's a good one to work.
it's a good one. But yeah, we routinely have people who've been there, 30 to over 30 years.
Okay, then take us through a typical day today. Like what in your current position, what's a typical day,
Yeah.
if there is one?
I don't know that there necessarily is one. My view of leadership is that your role is to help remove obstacles. And so really my day is just filled with meetings to help resolve issues.
Put out fires.
Put out fires, and then help your team think through the path where we're going and what do we need to do to get there. So kind of a combination problem. Well, it's always it's a problem solver, which is what I like.
How about being a visionary?
Yes.
The visionary aspect of that.
I really like that part. So some of the reflection that I've done over the past couple of years is like I'm really interested in MBTI and like your personality style. And mine is INTJ, which apparently is a pretty unique one, especially for women. I think there's only, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but maybe only like 2% of the population is INTJ. And so I'm an introvert and I'm more visionary, but very focused around data and kind of method. It's like, okay, yeah, that describes me. And so what I've learned is that I can quickly jump to that overall big picture and see where it all fits. But a lot of engineers are usually ISTJ. And so they're sensing, they like those step by step. They want to know that detailed plan. And so I think that's one of the things I've had to learn as a leader. I quickly jump to that big picture, but I forget that not everyone might be there at that same point. And so how do I lay the pebbles so that they know what path to follow so that they can see it.
I think you need to come back and teach.
No.
You need to get your PhD and get in the classroom.
I love teaching. So like whenever we have interns coming in, that is my favorite time of the year because
I can see it.
you get to sit down and help them understand just kind of the basics of the business. And I think once you get that fundamental understanding, then there's so much that you can do with it later.
So you can start on your master's part-time and
I
by
love
the time
it.
you're 50, be ready to go.
Yeah, I love it.
Plant my seed there.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so. I mean, I just really hope that, young women can really see the possibilities of STEM, and there is no set stereotype for what you can do with STEM or who can be in STEM. It really is open to all, and we need that diversity of thought and perspective in order to be better as a society. So
And girls can do it.
girls can absolutely do it.
Boys can do it
Boys
too.
can do it too. Yeah, we need everyone. So
Okay, then my last question is when history is written about Melissa, what do you want it to say?
that's a great question.
How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as someone who is that strong encourager and someone that people look back on and say, she was such a strong mentor and supporter and really helped me to really grow and make some huge contributions. So I want to be known as someone who is constantly looking for ways to make people and things better.
I think you've accomplished that so far, haven't you?
Well, I don't know. I'm still working on it.
Well,
Still
I
working.
appreciate you coming and sharing this with us today. It's been great.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.